What's up, YouTube? This is your boy Kian Sobani. I just wanted to quickly explain what I put together for you guys today. So this is an Mbappe themed podcast, and it's taken from two separate podcasts we've done in the past week. So part one of this is from the post-game show against Sheriff, where Arbin and I broke that game down. And at the very end, we talked about PSG Manchester City, why things are going wrong at PSG, and why the front three caused such an imbalance. And that ties into today's theme because part two, Lucas Navarrete and I were asked on the Thursday mailbag, let's say if you just replace Rodrigo with Mbappe in the starting lineup, how would that affect us defensively? Kind of just looking at the PSG case study. So we talked about the defensive side of things. And I know it's not exactly Real Madrid related, but it pretty much is. And one of the hot topics is, look, if you bring in Mbappe, where does he play? How does that affect our team's defense, etc.? So this is probably just tip of the iceberg stuff. When and if Mbappe gets signed, we'll go much deeper on this. But, it's been a recurring theme about Mbappe now for a few months. And the newest theme we get a lot of questions about is how does this affect us defensively if you just put Mbappe in the lineup over one of our current front three attackers? And especially if you can conjoin them with Benzema and Vinicius, how does that affect us defensively? So that's today's theme. Enjoy it. As always, the rabbit hole goes much deeper. We put out 5 podcasts a week. We did 5 podcasts in 4 days last week. And all of these are in your podcast app. So if you want timely versions of these, then you just search Managing Madrid on your podcast app. You get free episodes in your phone, notified. You can enjoy them on your commute and or wherever the hell you listen to your podcast, cooking, gym, commute, whatever. And also, if you want to go even deeper than that, patreon.com/Managing Madrid, where we do even more bonus content. We go very, very deep on Real Madrid's loanees. We do mailbags. We do post-game shows. You get actual access to Zoom links for Champions League games where you can join us. We do live video breakdowns. It goes much deeper than these YouTube clips. And also, come out to our live podcasts. These are the ones we have left. New York next week, Miami January, London, UK February, and then we got Chicago in March, Washington DC in April, and then Mumbai in May. So come out to those as well. And if you need help booking your spot, just comment. I'll help you book your spot. Okay. Enjoy the Mbappe clips. Have a great day. Hala Madrid. I really wanted, if I had to choose, the PSG Manchester City game obviously is the blockbuster one, but if I had to choose one other game I could have watched today, it would have been Atletico Milan. But obviously I didn't because they were at the same time as Real Madrid. I just like to put an announcement out. Everyone who's well, just put up 2 screens, 3 screens. I can't watch football like that. I can't do it. I've never been able to do that. Especially if I'm taking notes on Real Madrid. My focus is undivided attention goes there. That's it. So I either have to watch a tape delay or I have to hope that they just... I don't understand how the scheduling works either. Some groups play at different times. Within the group, the first game will be, at 2:45. It's usually, or 12:45. I can't remember. And the second game will be a little later, but it's kind of random too. So all the good games were at the same time today. So yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch it. I saw the score line for the Dortmund game, which, wow, they were in trouble. And I saw all the scores, and I saw highlights of Manchester City 2, PSG 1. It seemed very one-sided. But I wanted to, because you've probably watched PSG more than I have this season.
I haven't watched.
Go ahead.
I thought you took the long Obama pause there. I was just gonna say I haven't watched a ton of them, but I've caught Champions League games and a couple Liga games, just to kind of see what all the, crazy discourse is about.
So the much of the criticism of PSG is that the front three don't defend, which I think is obviously problematic. If you're Manchester United and you have the Ronaldo problem, for example, you can get around that in the sense that Ronaldo will get you goals, and plus you have everyone else can maybe apart from Greenwood, you can get everyone else to kind of do more defensive work to compensate. But if you have 3 players like that, maybe it's more difficult. And I'm just wondering, like, if you're Pochettino, who's getting a lot of heat right now, what is actually the solution if the front 3 literally just say, no, I'm not defending? Like, what kind of thing can you draw up? Where, like, would you go in a deeper block and try to counterattack? Would you go high press? Like, what would you actually do to get around having 3 of the best players ever together in a lineup that don't defend?
So Poch has actually been leaning off press steadily, and I think he did the only thing he could do versus Manchester City, the thing that everyone was telling him that he should do, which was play a much deeper block, play a block of 7, have the back 4, have 3 central midfielders who work really hard, shifting from side to side, and let the other 3 be kind of lazy and float up top and use their threat in transition maybe to pin some people back or just flat out pick up the ball and go on the counterattack and just kill people that way, right? Which is exactly what he did versus Manchester City. And I had that game on in the background, but that doesn't really work to analyze. Like, my focus was on Real Madrid, so I've been rewatching before we recorded this podcast, and it's just evident that it didn't work. I mean, it was okay. It's not like Man City completely creamed them, but it was really, really clear who the superior side was, and City had a bunch of absences. Like, just on paper, looking at it, you'd think, oh, PSG have the better 11. I mean, they don't have Verratti, but that's just always the case in a key Champions League game. He's like never there. Like, people always say that, and I'm like, he's never there. I think you kind of just have to take it for granted that PSG are going to be without him. And even then, right, like, there was no Grealish. Guardiola wasn't going with the striker as he often did. There was no De Bruyne, and City were just clearly better. And I think this is like a huge test case for why you cannot have in modern football 3 players who don't do any real defending. Like, even 2 players, I think is really pushing it. You can get exposed in a lot of ways. 3 is too much because you can't even defend deep that way. Like, you need 8 players in a block behind the ball at least if you're gonna defend in a block. And the reason is because of what we saw, what Man City did versus PSG, which was they're too good on the ball. They're too good at being able to circulate and switch play. And they kept, stretching that very thin midfield line of 3 side to side. We're able to isolate the fullback. And if the midfield was able to shift over in time, they were able to play the far side ball to a fullback who had just too many options behind him. And they were able to get in and score. They were able to play channel balls. Like, you can overload the wide areas way too easily. And with really solid counter-pressing, you can limit that supposed insane danger of having Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe in transition. Like, if you can't even win the ball back, right, how are you going to be able to generate transition? Too much is out of your hands. And PSG had some threat. Like, actually, where they were most impressive was in settled possession play, which has been Poch's big weak point so far at PSG. That was actually where they were strongest. But it wasn't enough because they weren't dominating the game. They weren't high pressing. They needed stuff in offensive transition, and they weren't able to get anything. Like, I've watched 30 minutes and 35 minutes so far, or I'm almost done with the half, and I found like 2 like semi-dangerous counterattacks. Like, City just completely strangled them, consistently found a way to overload the fullbacks because there was no one coming to help them out, right? It had to be a central midfielder, and it's too easy to, if you have City's quality, to just go to the far side and test them over and over again. And when Jesus came on in the second half, they finally had that focal point they needed, and it was game over even after PSG went up 1-0 initially. So it's just not possible so far with what I'm seeing. You need, in modern football, at best, you can have one guy who doesn't work against the ball. That's it.
Yeah, and makes this a really, really interesting case study because, like, if you have 3 players like that, the thing is, like, these are not just 3 players who don't defend, who are just normal players. These are 3 players who don't defend, who to compensate for it are absolute offensive Armageddons, supernovas, all-timers. Maybe not all three of them at the peak of their powers, but, you know, we don't have to sit here and try to convince each other of how great those three are, even at this stage of their careers for Messi. But, like, I'm surprised that it really has gone this badly, in the sense that, to me, the solution, like, it's easier said than done, and I'm recording this literally from my basement. Like, I would never walk into PSG and fix this problem, obviously. But it's like you have the players to play a possession-based game. If you can't defend, hold the ball. Like, that's what you got to do. Your best form of defense has to be literally to just pass it around. That's got to be your defensive stance if you can't physically defend. Hold the ball, counter press. Those three players have some counter pressing in them, you know. But at the very least, hold the ball. I think their issue will be when they go up against, this will largely depend on who the midfield is behind them, and they need everyone healthy, and they don't have that much depth in midfield. But the problem is when they go up against a team like Manchester City, or let's say Liverpool or Bayern, they won't be able to hold the ball against those teams. So then they have to shift to a deeper block, and I just don't know if I trust them in those against those teams to actually be able to defend well for consistent like 1 to 90, and get some good attacks out of it. So do you feel like it's too soon to write them off? Like, I would never write them off just because I feel like that their individual talent is so great that you write them off at your own peril. Like, they can transcend some tactical things, but I don't know if this experiment's going to end well by the end of the season.
So the reason I'd say, like, you shouldn't say, like, this is it, this is PSG's peak level with all this, is because I think Poch hasn't figured out what to do in possession and how to make the best of Messi. Like, until, like, last game and maybe a couple before, when he was fit, he was available, he was on the pitch, he was being used, like, on the sideline. And, like, Poch just, I mean, his possession, like, it was really hard to figure out, like, what the structure was in possession for, you know, a more tactically minded coach. Now, I think more people are realizing this now, but the possession side of the game and, like, the offensive structure is not what makes Poch. Like, he's good at it, but at least in my estimation, he's not at, like, the Tuchel, he's not at the Pep level. It was pressing first. He built a truly elite, top-tier pressing system, and then there were a bunch of good things under that when you put all of it together, you're like, wow, this guy's a really great coach. Now, what we've done with PSG is, you said, like, pressing at any kind of respectable level is just impossible. You can't do it. So you take away Poch's number one weapon, and then you, like, say all the other parts of Poch's, you know, tactical repertoire has to come to the fore, and the possession side hasn't been as impressive so far. And it only seems like you could kind of see it in this game, like, he's kind of figuring out a little bit, how am I going to position Messi inside, you know, alongside Neymar? You know, what am I going to do with Mbappe? How am I going to get all of them to kind of release Ashraf? There's, I think, definite growth that can happen there. Like, I think you can do a lot more to make all of that more effective in possession. And that's where maybe if you wanted to be an apologist for what PSG were doing, you can say, hey, don't write them off now. Let's see what happens. That's what I would say. But ultimately, I just don't think it's going to get better on the defensive side of things. Like, I'm pretty comfortable saying that unless one of those guys, you know, they have a conversation with each other and someone decides to sacrifice, then I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, Neymar is already kind of doing that to an extent. His pressures are barely respectable, but it's nowhere near to cover up for, like, Mbappe and especially Messi's complete inactivity. Like, the defensive side of things, I don't see it changing. I think this is as good as it gets. I mean, the 7 players who were defending versus City actually defended well. You know, they played their heart out. They worked their ass off. If the numbers are against you, you can't do it. You can't do it with 7 players against a positional play, against a philosophy and system that's like, I'm going to create superiorities in every phase of the game, assuming I'm facing a team that's defending with at least 8 players, right? You're just working against the math here. So defense, I think we've really seen enough, because this is Poch's side of the game. It's not like he's bad at coaching deep block either, but the possession side is where I think you can make an argument, say, let's wait, let's see what happens, and let's see how it develops. And there's there's also maybe another case to be made, like Messi can play a lot better here, even given everything that's happened, because it kind of looks like he doesn't care at the moment because he probably doesn't want to be here, and we'll have to see how that develops.
Ahmed Taha says, hey, Kian and Lucas, so Rodrigo and Vinicius do a lot of defensive work. Maybe Rodrigo does more. Now, let's assume Mbappe arrives and replaces Rodrigo in the lineup. Wouldn't that be a problem, considering that Vinicius has been staying higher up the pitch this season and Mbappe does way less defensive work than Rodrigo?
Well, I don't know if it will be a big problem, but the Ancelotti and the coaching staff will definitely have to find a way to make it work through the midfield, I'm guessing. They would probably not ask neither Vinicius nor Mbappe to work harder defensively, because if you do that, you take away some of their threats offensively. So I think that some adjustments will need to be made in the midfield, where especially in Modric's spot or where Valverde plays. That would be Valverde's spot as well. So maybe, timeline fits a little bit better for Real Madrid in this sense. And as soon as Mbappe plays more on the right wing, Valverde would be playing more often on the central midfielder spot, and that instantly would help a lot in this regard, because I think Valverde's physicality and work rate defensively is definitely something that would help Real Madrid's right wing more than Modric is right now. Although, don't get me wrong, I obviously appreciate Modric's effort and physicality on the central midfielder spot. I think that Valverde is more defensively oriented, and from that sense, I think his presence could help when or if Mbappe signs for Madrid and plays on the right wing.
I think just this PSG experiment, the way that it's gone, the fact that the front three aren't defending, and their offense hasn't been good enough to compensate for that, for the team's imbalance. I think that's an important thing to learn from. And if you want to avoid that happening here, you have to figure it out. And I don't think you can strip defensive duties from all three of the attack. I don't know if Mbappe is going to be the one to be more defensive. I think you almost have, if you're going to, let's say theoretically you have Vinicius, Benzema, and Mbappe together, I think you're going to have a little bit more onus on Vinicius to do more defensive work. Like, someone has to be a martyr. Someone has to sacrifice in order for this to make it work. Vinicius is a good defensive player from what we've seen all the way back from the Solari days, where he did a lot of good defensive work on the wing. He was covering for the fullback. I think you need... Right. Benzema historically is a good defensive player. You see him dropping in midfield, dispossessing opponents. You see him pressing well. I think those two will have to take on some defensive responsibilities, and Mbappe will be ultimately the free guy because it's Mbappe. But you have to learn from the PSG experiment in that sense. I think you can't basically bring something like that here and expect it to work without any of them defending it. You can basically just see PSG falling apart in every big game because of that. One more question. Tahmid Kalam says, can we start a petition